This is the Ramana Maharshi Self-Knowledge Satsang. Self-knowledge is what brings self-realization, the deep experiential knowledge of your own existence, here and now. This is a time for self-reflection and self-inquiry. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I've followed Ramana Maharshi for 30 years. I took satsang for many years from one of the finest teachers of Ramana, Nome, of Sat in Santa Cruz, California. I am a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep teaching, so I offer these satsangs to share this with you. This series is a paragraph by paragraph review of Ramana's seminal book, Who Am I? The all-text version, which was edited by Ramana himself. Today, we are on paragraph 16. Ramana's words. Atman alone exists and is real. The threefold reality of world, individual soul, and God is like the illusory appearance of silver in the mother of pearl, an imaginary creation in the Atman. They appear and disappear simultaneously. The self alone is the world, the I, and God. All that exists is but the manifestation of the Supreme. Ramana restates the basic ancient Advaita Vedanta non-dual idea, Tat Svam Asi, thou art that. Another way this is said is you are that which you seek. All that appears as separate to the conceptual mind, all that has a beginning and will have an end, all that comes and goes, is none other than and only Atman, none other than the self. This self is yourself, the only self that you have. There is no separate reality, no separate ego, no individual. These are just imaginations of mind. There is no creation, no passing from creation. What exists, exists. What does not exist, does not exist. There is no reality outside of or separate from being consciousness bliss, Sat Chidananda in Sanskrit. The central element of self-inquiry is to discover this reality as your own identity, to have this as your own direct knowledge, your immediate experience. This knowledge is at the same level and certainty as you know that you exist. deeper than mind or senses. There is no difference here between what you know and who you are. I think that this teaching is the most radical of the Advaita Vedanta teachings. It brings doubts from many who hear it. This doubt is finally resolved by spiritual experience, by the direct knowledge of yourself found through inquiry, not through thinking about the self. As one reads what Ramana taught, he stresses that as long as you hold the world and such to be real, you will not stand as the self. If you understand this teaching at a conceptual level, rather than diving into your own inquiry to see this is how this is true within yourself, then little progress will occur. There are four primary teachings, the four Mahavakyas, that are at the base of Advaita Vedanta, the teaching of non-duality. The first is Prajnana Brahma, knowledge or consciousness is Brahman. The second is I am Atma Brahman. This self is Brahman. The third is Tattvam Asi. You are that. The fourth is Aham Brahma Asmi. I am Brahman. They all express the insight that the individual self, the jiva, which appears as a separate identity, is in its essence the Atman, is the manifestation of the whole, Brahman, the vast absolute. We are instructed to inquire and to find out for ourselves what is real and what is just passing illusion, like images projected onto a movie screen. In this metaphor, we are the screen. Does the movie screen get excited at the image of a fire? Yet people live their lives identified with the illusory appearance and never notice the reality. Where does this sense of reality come from? Now, on to our videos. The first is from the Ribhu Gita. And the Ribhu Gita was the book that was the most used at Ramanashram in Ramana's days. In the evenings, most evenings, after the day's visitors had left, Ramana and the ashram residents would gather and read aloud from the Ribhu Gita, passing the book around the circle. Ramana said that if you were unable to do spiritual practice, you could just read from the Ribhu Gita and get that same effect. So now we will listen to a part of the Ribhu Gita, Brahman alone exists.
This world never exists. It never manifested, nor does it ever exist by itself. This world, said to be a wonder, is always verily naught. The phenomenal world, the mind faculty, the ego sense, the individuality do not exist. Brahman alone being, all of these are ever naught. The effects of delusions, etc., the fear of delusion do not exist. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. There is no doer, no action, nor the instrument, dear son. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. One there is none, nor is there any two. There is no mantra, tantra, or shastra. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. There is no listening or reflection, nor is there one-pointedness of mind, nor delusion. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. The two types of absorption in self do not exist. The one who measures, the measurement, and the instrument do not exist. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. Surely ignorance does not exist. There is never the talk of imprudence. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. The tetrad of the quadrilemma, and the triad of related connections are absent. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. Past and future do not exist at all. Indeed, the present is completely absent. Brahman alone being, all of these are ever naught. Ganga, Gaya, the Setu Bandhana Rameshwaram, and the rituals thereof and other religious things do not exist. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. There are no earth, no water, no fire, no air, no space anywhere. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. There are none of the celestials, no guardians of directions, no father and no guru anywhere. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. There is no far and near, no end, no middle, nor any position whatsoever. There is no unity, no duality, nor truth nor untruth here. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. There is no bondage and no liberation. There is no need for declaration. Neither are there somewhere, something, real and unreal, pleasures and such. Nowhere are there pairs of opposites, rituals relating to holy waters, self or non-self. No generation, no growth, no death, or the illusion of coming and going. There is no here, there is no hereafter, there is no guru or disciple, real and unreal, existence, duty, and completed action. All these are non-existent. Race, refuge, caste, convention, all these are non-existent. The sextet of self-discipline, physical and mental restraints, all indeed non-existent. All is illusion. Brahman alone is. Consciousness alone is. All these words are indeed non-existent. The statement, I am consciousness, is non-existent. I am eternal, are truly nowhere existent. Brahman alone being, all these are ever naught. Whatever conveyed through utterances, whatever contemplated by mind, whatever determined by intellect, whatever understood by rational mind, that which is unified through yoga, performed through the senses, etc., the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states, and the fourth transcendental state, all these are non-existent. This is to be realized. These are all limiting adjuncts, superimpositions. There is never any purification through holy baths, nor is there any sanctity through meditation. The three gunas do not exist in the least. Neither does the triad, the triple structure. Expressions such as one or two are non-existent. So is the misapprehension of many. Delusion and the lack of it are indeed non-existent. Be certain nothing in the least is there. These being Brahman alone, nothing in the least remains. Whoever hears this with attention becomes Brahman himself.
Ribhu talked about the non-existence, but something is always real. What is this? Experience it for yourself. Rupert Spira has studied and practiced non-dual teachings most of his life. He follows Ramana's teachings after early experiences with the Rumi and Sufi ecstatic dance. Here he will talk about real and unreal experience.
I was going to get back to the knowing, and my feeling that things have different levels of reality. In other words, going back to the singing that was happening before, that feels more real to me than my thoughts. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you could say about that feeling that there's things that are more real than others in the world for me, if it makes sense.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that I understand your question. But have you ever had an unreal experience?
Not since the 60s.
Okay. Cast your mind back to the 60s.
Don't go there anymore.
Looking around, many of you are old enough to remember it. In fact, don't they say that if you remember the 60s, you weren't there? But I'm not old enough to remember it. I was in my cradle, but many of you do remember these unreal experiences. So just imagine one of these LSD trips or whatever. You're hallucinating. You're flying across the universe in a bed of roses or whatever it is. Is that experience, whatever it is, a hallucination, a dream, a vision, is it not a real experience nonetheless? Let's come a little bit closer to home. Last night's dream, made out of much the same stuff as an LSD trip is made of. Mind. Yeah? But is there such a thing as an unreal dream? Now, you may have been dreaming last night that you were sunbathing on a Caribbean beach. And in the dream, the Caribbean beach seemed to be made, like our waking state experience, seems to be made out of stuff called matter. You wake up and you realize the Caribbean beach wasn't made out of matter. So it was an illusion as a beach made out of matter. But like all illusions, that illusion had a reality to it. It was made out of mind, not matter. But as mind, as a dream or a vision or a hallucination, it is real.
And no less real.
And no less real. I mean, what is this experience that you're having now made of? Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, and thinking. The dream you had last night is no less real than this experience. And if we explore all experience, the taste of a cup of coffee, an LSD trip, a deep depression, an ecstatic moment of joy, any experience, or rather, all experience is equally real. And all experience is made equally out of knowing. A deep depression is known. An ecstatic moment of joy is known. An LSD trip is known. The taste of coffee is known. The knowing element of all experience is exactly the same. Whether it's an LSD trip, a deep depression, or the taste of coffee, the knowing element of it is identical in each case. And when I say the knowing element of it, I suggest that there is another part of the experience that is not knowing. In other words, I suggest there are other elements. But there aren't. All there is to experience is the knowing of it. And that knowing is always in the same pristine condition. And it is from this knowing that all experience derives its reality. Thus all experiences are equally real. The fact that some seem to be made out of stuff called matter and that some seem to be made out of stuff called mind doesn't change the fact that in our actual experience, and only experience can be the test of reality, all experience is made equally alike out of knowing.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thanks. How do I know that my experience of knowing, in other words, if I can accept the unbreakableness of knowing and known, and then the screen, things happening on the screen, it feels like a jump to say that, I guess to use your metaphor, that my screen is the same as your screen, that what I think of as I am is what you mean by that when you say it, much less that they are, and I think this is what you're saying, continuous with each other.
Okay. Well, if they weren't continuous, in other words, if there were 100 different fields of knowing, or 150 different fields of knowing in this room, or let's say 7 billion different fields of knowing in the world, then each of those fields of knowing would have, by definition, to be limited. Yes?
Why?
Because there are 7 billion of them. You cannot have 7 billion unlimited fields.
Why not?
Well, how many spaces are there in the universe?
You could have an infinite number of planes in the universe, and each one would be in its own
They would be
dimension.
distinguished from each other. In order to claim there are an infinite number of them, you would have to be able to see more than one. You'd have to be able to distinguish one from the other. How would you distinguish one from the other if they didn't have a form and therefore a limit? We're not talking theory here, we're talking experience. How many spaces are there in the universe? I'm talking that how many of this kind of space, this space that's in the room, how many of them are there in our universe?
I don't know.
Well, there's one. Have you ever found a limit to physical space?
Not
Well,
yet. But
if you haven't yet,
how do I know
not
that?
yet. That's it. Not yet. Okay. Well, let's presume, and this is a safe presumption, that until we do find a limit to physical space, there's only one of it. Let's be open to the possibility that if we find a limit, then we can reasonably conclude there's more than one of them. Not when we theorize that there may be more than one of them, but when we find a limit to physical space. I don't want to go too far here because it's just a metaphor. When we find a limit to physical space, then we can legitimately conclude there is a limit, and therefore there must be more than one of them. Now, what about the field in which your experience appears? Can you find a limit to it?
I can't find a limit to it, but
Has anybody in this room ever found a limit to the field in which their experience appears?
well, actually, so let me try this. When I first in the morning find myself waking up, and I'll be aware sometimes of a period of strange thoughts, and that would seem like experience has just come from a period when it wasn't there.
What
So
about
that-
when you were dreaming before you woke up? Were you not knowing your dream?
Dreaming, yes, but then there's also sleeping when there's no
But
dreaming.
what about, let's just talk about the difference between dreaming and waking. Did you not know your dream? Do you not know the waking state?
I think I remembered the dream.
When the dream was taking place, did you not know it? And if you didn't know it, you couldn't remember it. You know your dreams, yes?
I remember something that maybe...
Well, if you remember it, you must have known it when it was taking place. Yes? So when your dream was taking place, you knew it. Yes?
Okay.
Was that a yes or a no?
Yes. I still don't know how that rules out things beyond that, but yes to that.
Okay, so in other words, what I'm trying to show is that there is a continuity between the knowing, which knows your dreams, and the knowing, which knows the waking state. You say, I knew my dream, and I know the taste of breakfast.
Right.
The same I, the same knowing, knows the dream and knows the waking state. In other words, that knowing doesn't wake up when you wake up in the morning. It was already fully awake, knowing the dream. The content of your experience changes, and you then call it the waking state, but the knowing with which the dream and the waking state take place, and with which they are known, remains identical throughout. All that happens in deep sleep is that that knowing loses its colouring. It no longer continues to modulate itself in the form of the finite mind, and so there is no objective experience. But there is no discontinuity of knowing. So if you explore your experience very carefully, you'll see that this knowing, consciousness, never comes to an end. When I say, if we explore our experience, consciousness is the only one that knows. So it is only consciousness could know anything about itself. Only this knowing could know this knowing. So if we ask consciousness, do you ever have the experience of yourself disappearing? Consciousness, if it could speak, would say, no, in my own experience of myself, I am eternally present. Not everlasting, but ever present. If you were to ask consciousness, if you look around yourself, I'm caricaturing consciousness now. If you were to ask consciousness, look around yourself. Do you ever find a limit to yourself? Consciousness would, as it were, look around and say, no, I find no limit in myself. In my own experience of myself, I am without limits or infinite. And by infinite, I don't mean infinitely large. I mean infinite, that means with no dimensions at all. It means that what each of us is experiencing now, what the finite mind knows as time and space, is made out of dimensionless consciousness. That is our experience. It is our experience. It is everybody's experience now. All that is being known is knowing. And it is knowing that is knowing that. And if that knowing asks itself, do I find any limits in myself? Any limit in time or space? The answer is always no. Infinite consciousness has no dimensions. It is not located in time and space. So I have given you the argument to show that there is absolutely no rational basis for the belief that consciousness, that is the knowing with which each of us is knowing our experience, is limited, and therefore that all our minds must share consciousness. I've just given you the argument for it. That, if you follow the argument, and if this argument has satisfied your objections, then that leaves us open to the possibility of experiencing it as such, and then living on a basis of that experience. Try it out just for 24 hours. Say to yourself, I have been living for decades based on the presumption that what I am is essentially separate from what everyone and everything else essentially is. Now, I don't believe you would be at this meeting if that presumption had given you what you deeply want in life, which is peace and happiness. So just give the alternative possibility a try. Just 24 hours. Live for the next 24 hours. Think, feel, act, perceive and relate on the basis that there is only one being, that all selves and objects share that being, and think in a way that is consistent with that possibility, but more importantly, feel and act and relate in such a way, and see what response you get. See how the quality of relationship is changed just by living ability, let alone the realization. And if you like the results that come, the response you get from the universe, extend the experiment. Keep exploring it.
Next is Nome. Nome was my teacher for many years. Like Ramana, he had a spontaneous awakening in his teens. Meditate along with him to experience what he's talking about. Experience it. Don't just think about it. His talk is the self is Brahman.
I am Atma Brahman. This self is Brahman. This is declared in the Upanishads. It is the simple truth. Similarly, the Upanishads declare, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. It is the same truth. The aspirant for liberation through self-realization is instructed, Tattvamasi, that you are. The meaning of these is quite clear. Your existence, the self, is Brahman, only Brahman, and you do not have another kind of existence. That Brahman is absolute existence. It is non-dual, which signifies that there is nothing else other than it whatsoever. It is eternal, so necessarily it must be immutable. The changeless, the unborn, the imperishable, for which there is nothing else whatsoever. Such is Brahman, such is your real identity. To imagine yourself to be anything other than that is the cause, the starting point for any kind of illusory bondage and its consequent suffering. Your own nature, which is being consciousness bliss, has not a trace of bondage and does not suffer at all. For that, there is no samsara, no repetitive cycle of illusion of birth and death. If you strive for liberation from all this imagined bondage, to seek the bliss that is innate, you must know yourself. But in seeking to know yourself, you must not treat yourself as something other than the self, apart from it, for such is misidentification or ignorance. The very point of the inquiry, who am I, is to know yourself as you are, and not imagine yourself to be something other. If you take yourself to be something other, there will also be other things for that other one. For the individual, the jiva, there appears Jagat, the universe, and Ishvara, God, or Para, the Supreme. And all of that is treated as differentiated. But it is not so. If the individual being that you may assume yourself to be now inquires into his own nature, his individuality being unreal vanishes, and with it disappears all sense of otherness. If you are other than the self, then there's a world other than you, and an absolute, whether called God or the self, other than you. But who are you? As long as the self would be treated as other than you, when will there be realization? If the self were known to be just as you are, that that is all that you are, when would there be non-realization? In the Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse that says that the dharma of another is fraught with danger, and one's own dharma should be pursued. Again, the meaning is easily discernible. One's own dharma is to exist as the self and not as another. The dharma of another, that is of an ego, of a mind, of a body, is fraught with danger. The danger of falling into the repetitive illusion of samsara. To know yourself as you are is to be free of all such danger of samsara. It is the uprooting of the very potential for illusion. To know yourself is what is essential. Do not treat what is other than you as you. If you discard as having anything to do with your identity what is actually other, what is objective, what is changeful, what is not constant. Indeed, everything that's created or destructible. If you negate that from your sense of identity, what is it that remains? What remains is not limited in time and space, for it is not a body and it is not a mind. What remains is neither a state of bondage nor liberation, but is ever liberated, for it has no trace of individuality or egotism. What remains is what has been existing the whole time, and nothing other than that has actually been existing. So knowledge just reveals and does not bring about something new. It reveals what is real. What is real is the self, or that existence which is absolute, called Brahman. The same Vedas and the same Upanishads proclaim that Brahman is all, and yet also say Brahman alone is. How can Brahman be all and Brahman alone is? How can we have these two statements? They are not contradictory. All that actually exists is only Brahman. What is it that actually exists? When you think something exists, be it subtle or gross, from where does such experience or thought derive its reality? If, like this, you trace inward through inquiry what is real, you will find yourself, your being, which is consciousness, as the sole existent reality, or Brahman. And for that there is no other. Where there is no possibility of another, such is non-duality. The Maharshi has said that where I arises, all arises, and when I subsides, all subside. Therefore, we should know the nature of this I. If we seek this I which seems to rise and fall, and upon which everything else depends in our experience, and such is invariable, if we seek this I that rises and falls, we will find no such entity called I. What remains, knowing itself with its own innate knowledge, is pure being consciousness, the real self, which has no other I. So then, has anything actually arisen? Does anything disappear? This self is Brahman. It means your very existence is Brahman. Your existence is not two. There is only one existence for you. Bodiless, it is unborn and imperishable. Beyond thought, it can never be conceived. It remains as the unknown knower of everything known. this self that you invariably are should know itself. For this, inquire, who am I?
And now we will meditate, inquire for a little bit. Just notice that you exist. You exist, and you know you exist without thinking of it or sensing of it. This knowledge is deeper than thought or the senses. Then inquire, investigate within yourself. Where does this sense of reality come from? Is it from the body? Is it from the senses? Is it from the mind? Just where does this sense of reality come from? Where did the sense of reality come from in last night's dream? Like the waking state, the dream seems real. It's got subjects and objects and yourself and the world, and it's all real. Where did that sense of reality come from? Is it from the dream, or is it from you? Now inquire, who am I? What is the nature of my existence? All right. Now we'll close with a short chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more for you: a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on the screen next. These satsangs will continue in the coming weeks with this series based on the Ramana Maharshi book, Who Am I? Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you.